It's one of these myths that go around for decades already, that everyone wants to be solved.
They disappeared, so you couldn't ask for a better ending, right? To keep it going forever.
After more than 60 years, the Alcatraz escape mystery has finally been solved. In 1962, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin vanished from the island's maximum security prison using improbable tools that made their escape seem impossible.
Immediately, this creates chaos. These prisoners are gone. How could these prisoners have escaped this super security prison?
For decades, authorities searched endlessly. Now, in 2025, investigators have unveiled breakthroughs that could finally reveal what happened that night. Did they drown in the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay, or did they survive? The truth is finally within reach, ending one of America's most legendary prison mysteries. The Escape Team. In a stunning development, the U.S. Marshals Service has released age-progressed images of the 3 inmates who famously vanished from Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay. While authorities long assumed the men perished in the icy waters, persistent sightings, letters, and forensic clues have fueled speculation that they might have survived. Now, more than 60 years later, the Marshals have reopened the case, hoping that these modern depictions will finally shed light on one of America's most enduring mysteries. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, known as The Rock, had a reputation as the nation's most brutal maximum security prison. Operating from 1934 to 1963, it housed some of the country's most notorious criminals, including Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the infamous Birdman of Alcatraz. At its peak, the island supported a small community of roughly 280 prisoners and 250 staff, isolated by cold, treacherous waters. Harsh conditions, rigid routines, and the belief that escape was impossible cemented its reputation. At the center of the escape plot was Frank Lee Morris, a quiet and calculating mind. Orphaned at 11, he bounced through foster homes and earned his first conviction by 13. By his late teens, he had been arrested multiple times for narcotics possession, armed robbery, car theft, and grand larceny. His years in prison across Florida, Georgia, and Louisiana culminated in a 10-year sentence for theft, possession. Morris stood out for his sharp mind, with an IQ of 133, placing him in the top 2% of the population. He spent his confinement reading, drawing, and observing. But intelligence was only part of his identity. He was also notorious for slipping out of custody. In April 1955, he escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary with inmate William Martin. After hitchhiking to Baton Rouge, they spent months in New Orleans, scouted a bank in Slidell, and later made their way to Kansas City, where Morris was captured a year later during a burglary alongside partner Earl Brancy. When Morris arrived at Alcatraz on January 18, 1960, as inmate AZ-1441, officers viewed him as quiet and unthreatening. Officer Mills even described him as a shy, neat, nice-looking young man, and claimed he seemed like the last inmate who would attempt an escape. At Alcatraz, he quickly earned a reputation as an intelligent, disciplined, and competent inmate, traits that soon attracted the right partners. Those partners were brothers John and Clarence Anglin. John, an older blonde man with blue eyes, arrived at Alcatraz on October 24, 1960 as inmate AZ-1476. Clarence, taller and heavier with dark hair and hazel blue eyes, followed on January 16, 1961 as inmate AZ-1485. Their criminal record had begun early. Clarence was first arrested at 14 for breaking into a service station. In the early 1950s, the brothers turned to coordinated bank robberies, striking only closed businesses to avoid harming anyone. They insisted they used a weapon only once, and even then it was a toy gun. Their most significant job took place on January 17, 1958, when John, Clarence, and their brother Alfred robbed the Bank of Columbia in Alabama and escaped with 19,000 euros. The FBI quickly captured them, and all three received 35-year sentences. They cycled through Florida State Prison, Leavenworth, and Atlanta Penitentiary, where they repeatedly tried to escape. In one attempt, Clarence cut 2 bread boxes apart, hid John inside, stacked bread around him, and nearly sent him out on a truck until a suspicious supervisor uncovered the plan. Their persistence led officials to ship both brothers to Alcatraz. One detail about the Anglins stood out. Long before prison, they were known for their ability to swim in the frigid waters of Lake Michigan, often impressing relatives by diving in even when ice floated on the surface. The final figure in this story was Allen West. Born in New York City on March 25, 1929, he had a long record of car thefts and escape attempts. By the time he drove a stolen car across the Georgia state line, he had already served multiple terms on prison farms. His behavior, violent, impulsive, and confrontational, frequently put him at odds with prison staff. Over his life, he was arrested more than 20 times. In 1955, West was imprisoned for car theft at Atlanta Penitentiary, then transferred to Florida State Prison. During one escape attempt, he held a gun to the associate warden's head, stole his car keys, and fled in the man's vehicle. After being caught, he was sent to Alcatraz in 1957 at age 28 as inmate AZ-1330 and returned in 1958 as AZ-1335. His time on the island included periods of isolation in D Block and work as a maintenance orderly. Despite disciplinary trouble, he constantly spoke of escaping and gravitated toward anyone who shared that focus. The connection between these 4 men formed gradually. On January 30, 1960, Morris was moved into cell 138 on the outer side of B Block, with West in the adjacent cell. Their relationship began unevenly. West's nonstop talking and accordion playing reportedly irritated Morris. Late that summer, West was sent to D Block after helping stage a disturbance during a meal to distract guards, while another inmate committed a stabbing elsewhere in the mess hall. Morris likely encountered John Anglin soon after his arrival in October 1960. The two had known each other from Atlanta. When Clarence arrived in January, the brothers occupied neighboring cells. Accounts differ on whether all 4 men had known one another before Alcatraz, but their shared histories in Florida and Georgia suggest some level of familiarity. When they found themselves aligned in the same cell block, their pasts began to interlock like pieces of a long-forming puzzle. Each man brought experience and a history of slipping through the cracks of the prison system. Together, they set in motion a plan that would become the most legendary breakout from what was once considered the world's most escape-proof prison. The Great Escape Plan. Many believed Frank Morris was the architect. Journalist John Campbell wrote that Morris learned of a critical weakness in the prison's infrastructure during a conversation in the brush shop. A fellow inmate told him that back in 1957, a prisoner named Willard Winhoven, an electrician serving time for robbery, had removed a fan motor from a ventilation shaft leading to the roof of B Block, and no replacement had ever been installed. The inmate joked, "Ask the bull for the key," implying Morris should simply ask the guards for access. Instead, Morris kept the information to himself. He waited until West returned from solitary in early 1972, ordered an accordion like West's, and then quietly shared the plan with the Anglins and West. West, however, claimed the escape had been his idea. During interrogation, he insisted he had devised the plan in the spring of 1961 while painting the prison roof, noticing that the ventilation shafts might provide a route out. He said he presented the idea to the Anglins, who later involved Morris. Prison officials doubted his version. West had a reputation for boasting, and his limited education made it unlikely he could design such a detailed scheme. By contrast, Morris had the intelligence, the background, and the escape history to lead a plan of this scale. Investigators also found instructions for making life jackets and boats in Morris's cell, not West's. Yet even if Morris led the strategy, West played a crucial role in gathering resources. It was his second time at Alcatraz, and he understood the routines, the officers, and the inmates well enough to obtain what they needed. Whoever conceived the idea, the plan began with the ventilator system. The prison's ceiling contained 8 ventilator openings, but only one had never been sealed with cement. Once the men discovered this, they realized that if they could reach the roof and clear that opening, the roofline might become their path to freedom. West's assignment to clean up after plumbers installing hot water faucets gave him a key insight. The hot water pipes were climbing straight up the interior wall. If they could reach that wall, the pipes could serve as a ladder to the top. The problem was how to open their cell vents without tools or alerting the guards. Morris first tried to burn through the concrete with an electric cord plugged into the ceiling light socket, but the method failed. That left only one option: digging. Each night during the quiet stretch between 5:30 and 9:30 in the evening, the inmates' informal happy hour, the 4 men worked on the vents behind their sinks. They chipped at the concrete using the sharpened ends of spoons stolen from the mess hall, creating small openings that slowly connected into larger ones. After each session, they covered the new gaps with wads of wet toilet paper smoothed with soap to match the wall's texture. Eventually, after many nights of digging, Morris loosened the concrete enough to remove the metal grill entirely. The opening, however, was too large to conceal without drawing suspicion. Using cardboard from the prison art supplies, he cut a piece to the exact size of the grill, sketched the crisscross pattern with precision, and painted it the same shade of institutional green. When he finished each night's work, he slid the handmade replica into place, perfectly hiding the damage. The others followed the same method. Morris added an extra precaution by placing his concertina case in front of the vent, while John Anglin hung a long raincoat to obscure his own. Now they had to face a different challenge: finding the perfect decoy. Dummies for decoy. The grills in their cells were finally wide enough for the men to squeeze through, but leaving their cells empty posed another problem. The guards would immediately notice their absence. To disguise their bodies, they crafted decoys. Clarence Anglin took the lead, stealing hair from his work at the prison barbershop to create realistic-looking heads. Their first attempt was crude, a rag and soap head topped with stolen hair for eyebrows and lashes. They nicknamed it Oink for its ungainly appearance. Next came Oscar, a far more lifelike creation, molded from toilet paper and soap to resemble a human head. When the men slipped out of their cells, they planned to leave the dummy heads on their pillows and fill the blankets beneath with rolled-up clothing, shaping the decoys to mimic sleeping bodies. While the prison carried on around them, Morris, West, and the Anglins had built a secret workshop, a small underground industry where they produced every tool needed for their escape. They faced a major challenge: the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. To survive, they would need flotation devices and a means to traverse the water. Morris, drawing on an article from Popular Mechanics, designed and built life jackets and 2 pontoons measuring roughly 6 by 14 feet, using waterproof Navy raincoats traded with other inmates. Inflating the rafts required ingenuity. Morris removed the keys from a concertina he had acquired and fashioned them into a bellows. Wooden paddles served as oars, and to strengthen both the rafts and life jackets, he applied a technique known as vulcanization, developed by Charles Goodyear in the 1830s to toughen the rubber and make it resistant to tearing. For navigation in the dark, frigid waters, Morris also created a makeshift flashlight. 2 penlight batteries connected to a small bulb inside a plastic box with a metal fastener serving as a switch. In the spring of 1962, Clarence Anglin became the first to climb the pipes to the top of the cell house and reach the ceiling vent. What he found was a setback. The ventilator, their escape route, was sealed with a solid metal cap secured by screws. Clarence attempted to loosen it using a makeshift wrench crafted from bed clasps, but it wouldn't budge. West stepped in, demonstrating his resourcefulness. When the prison vacuum cleaner broke, he volunteered to repair it and discovered to his surprise 2 motors inside. He repaired one, removed the other, then attached drill bits to it and used the motor to loosen the screws holding the vent cap. With the path finally accessible, the escape was ready to unfold. On the night of Sunday, June 10, 1962, Morris sent word to the others the following day would be the day they would attempt to break free from Alcatraz. A night of adrenaline. On the night of June 11, 1962, after lights out at 9:30, Morris and the Anglin brothers placed their dummy heads on their pillows and quietly slipped from their cells. They climbed toward the ceiling vent, moving cautiously through the darkened prison corridors. Of the 4 men, Alan West had not yet cleared the hole in the back of his cell. The cement edges still blocked his passage. As he worked from inside, Clarence Anglin attempted to widen the opening from behind the wall using a pipe supplied by Morris, but the noise risked alerting the guards. West, though panicked, continued chipping away at the stubborn cement. Meanwhile, the Anglins grew restless. Anxious not to miss their chance, they left West to finish on his own and pressed forward. By approximately 10:30, Morris pried open the cap leading to the roof. A noise echoed through the West gun gallery. One officer described it as the sound of someone hitting the end of an empty 50-gallon oil drum with the heel of his hand. He reported it to the on-duty lieutenant, who investigated but found nothing. The escapees rushed across the rooftop, but in their haste, they dropped a paddle and left behind a spare life jacket and raft. They reached the roof's edge and descended a 45-foot pipe along the prison kitchen wall. John Anglin swung too forcefully, producing another loud clang at 10:45, alerting guards once again. By 11 o'clock, Morris and the Anglin brothers had likely reached the shoreline. They assembled the raft, donned their life jackets, loaded supplies, and pushed into the icy waters, disappearing into the night. Meanwhile, West continued his desperate work, chipping through the cement with grim determination. By 1:40 in the morning, he finally broke through. Climbing onto the roof, he found it empty. His companions had already vanished. For a moment, he lingered, perhaps weighing his options before returning to the vent, crawling back into his cell and sliding into bed. He had been left behind. The next morning at 7:15, Officer Lawrence Bartlett conducted the routine head count along B Block. When he tried to rouse a sleeping Clarence Anglin, the prisoner did not respond. Alarmed, Bartlett called for Lieutenant Bill Long. Long knelt at the cell, pressing his head close to the bars. I reached my left hand in through the bars, hit the pillow, and hollered, "Get up for the count," he later recalled. The pillow toppled, and the dummy head rolled to the floor, revealing a broken nose from its fall. Meanwhile, another officer shouted from Morris's cell, "I got one here too." Long ran to the phone and the alarm sounded across Alcatraz. In that instant, it became clear the prison's most infamous inmates had vanished, leaving behind only convincing illusions of life and a mystery that would endure for decades. Intense manhunt. In the wake of the Alcatraz escape, an unprecedented search unfolded across the bay, the surrounding shoreline, and the skies above. Authorities discovered the men's secret workshop, where every tool, dummy, and life-saving device had been painstakingly assembled. Bloodhounds were brought in to trace the escapees' path, following the scent down to the water's edge, but no further. Over the next 10 days, multiple military and law enforcement agencies scoured the area by air, sea, and land. On June 14th, a Coast Guard cutter recovered a paddle floating roughly 200 yards off the southern shore of Angel Island. In the same vicinity, workers aboard another vessel found a wallet wrapped in plastic, containing the names, addresses, and photographs of the Anglins' friends and family. A week later, on June 21st, a life vest washed ashore at Cronkite Beach, nearly 3 miles from the Golden Gate Bridge. The following day, a prison boat picked up another life vest just 50 yards off Alcatraz, its strings still knotted. Beyond these fragments, no other trace of the men was ever found. Amid the speculation, eyewitness accounts added to the mystery of the case. San Francisco police officer Robert Chechi, stationed at the St. Francis Yacht Harbor in the Marina District on the night of the escape, claimed he had seen a fishing boat near Alcatraz. After 15 minutes, the vessel left, heading toward the Golden Gate Bridge. Some theorized that the prisoners had arranged an outside pickup. The FBI, however, dismissed Chechi's account, noting that it would have been illegal for any unauthorized vessel to come within several hundred yards of the island. Early on, FBI agents assumed the raft had capsized and the men had drowned. Their belongings, personal items that no escapee would willingly abandon, remained behind, reinforcing this theory. Yet with no bodies recovered, the possibility that the prisoners had made it to shore could not be ruled out. On July 17th, a month after the escape, the Norwegian ship SS Norefjell spotted a body floating 15 nautical miles from the Golden Gate Bridge. Without a large cold storage facility or radio contact with the Coast Guard, the crew could not recover it. San Francisco County Coroner Henry Turkle doubted the corpse was one of the escapees, pointing out the improbability of a body remaining afloat for over a month. He suggested it was more likely Cecil Philip Herman, a 34-year-old baker who had jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge 5 days prior. Interviews played a crucial role in the FBI's investigation, and Alan West, left behind on the roof, proved to be their most valuable witness. Bitter about being abandoned, West eagerly described the escape plan. According to him, the group intended to paddle north to Angel Island, rest briefly, then swim through Raccoon Strait to the shores of Marin County. Once on land, they planned to steal a car, rob a clothing store, and scatter in different directions. Despite this testimony, the FBI maintained that survival was highly unlikely. The bay's frigid waters and powerful currents would have made the journey nearly impossible. The official report concluded that the raft had never been found, and no thefts or suspicious activity on the mainland could be traced to the fugitives. In the days following the escape, hoaxes and false claims emerged. A man purporting to be John Anglin called a San Francisco lawyer, Eugenia McGowan, seeking to arrange a meeting with U.S. Marshals. When she refused, the call ended abruptly. A postcard addressed to the FBI appeared, bearing the message, "Ha ha ha, we made it. Frank, John, and Clarence." Handwriting and fingerprints proved it was a hoax. Another caller claimed to be Morris when phoning acting warden Arthur Dollison, but hung up when questioned about personal details only the honest Morris would know. The Alcatraz escape, combined with the escalating costs of maintaining the island prison, sealed its fate. On March 21, 1963, the federal government officially closed Alcatraz. And yet the question lingers: could they have survived? Recent discoveries. Many experts immediately dismissed the possibility that the escapees could have reached shore. Shortly after the breakout, Federal Bureau of Prisons Assistant Director Fred T. Wilkinson remarked, "The tides and winds that night were strong, and these convicts were not the athletic type. Only a trained athlete could make such a swim. Yet history has shown that the waters are not impossible to cross. Several people, including school children, have successfully made the same journey, proving that under the right conditions it could be done. In July 1972, the Norwegian ship Norefjell reported seeing a body floating in the water, wearing prison-issued pants, approximately 20 miles northwest of the Golden Gate Bridge. The crew, en route to Canada and without radio contact, did not report it until returning to the U.S. the following month. By then, the body had vanished, never to be recovered. Decades later, modern science weighed in. In 2014, Delft University researchers modeled the currents and tides of the night of June 11, 1962. Their study suggested that if the escapees had left Alcatraz at around 11:30 that night, they could have made it to Horseshoe Bay. At the same time, debris and equipment would likely have drifted toward Angel Island, consistent with the life jackets and other belongings later recovered there. Leaving earlier or later, however, would have made survival highly improbable. Testimony from guards confirmed that the prisoners launched their raft around 11 o'clock, aligning with the ideal window for survival. In 1993, former bank robber Thomas Kent provided further insight during an interview on America's Most Wanted. He claimed that Clarence Anglin had arranged for an old girlfriend to meet the group on the shores of Tiburon and drive them to Mexico, from where they planned to continue to South America. FBI records also show that Morris had purchased a Berlitz Teach Yourself Spanish book, supporting the notion of international plans. In 2003, the television show Mythbusters tested the feasibility of the escape. Using a raft modeled on the prisoner's design, the crew successfully navigated from Alcatraz to shore, proving that the journey was indeed possible. The FBI, meanwhile, conducted its own tests on the life jackets. Reinflated and weighed down, all 3 jackets remained airtight. They slowly lost air over the course of an hour, but enough remained that the men could have stayed afloat by periodically blowing into the valves. Additional evidence added further intrigue. A 2011 National Geographic documentary, Vanished from Alcatraz, cited old FBI files reporting a raft found on Angel Island on June 12, 1962, with footprints leading away from it. No further information about the discovery has been released. That same day, authorities in Marin County reported a 1955 blue Chevrolet, license plate KPB076, stolen, an incident also noted in the Humboldt Times and the San Francisco Examiner. The following day, a motorist in Stockton, California, more than 80 miles east of San Francisco, told the California Highway Patrol that he had been forced off the road by 3 men driving a blue Chevrolet. Each piece of evidence, each sighting, and each test fueled the enduring mystery. Had the escapees vanished into legend, or did they truly survive the waters of San Francisco Bay? The final hideout. Over the 50-plus years since they vanished, countless theories have tried to uncover where Morris, John, and Clarence Anglin went and what became of them. U.S. Marshal Michael Dyke, who inherited the unsolved case in 2003, admitted he did not know whether any of the men were still alive, but the evidence he encountered gave him pause. Some reports suggested that the Anglin's mother received roses for years with no card, and that the brothers attended her 1973 funeral disguised in women's clothing, despite a heavy FBI presence. In 2015, the History Channel documentary Alcatraz, Search for the Truth, revealed Christmas cards containing handwriting verified as the Anglins. However, none of the envelopes carried a postmark, leaving the delivery dates uncertain. That same year, a photograph allegedly showing the Anglin brothers hiding in Brazil, roughly 13 years after their escape, surfaced in a History Channel special. Fred Brizzi, a friend of the brothers, claimed he encountered them in Rio de Janeiro during the 1970s and captured the image. Forensic experts working for the family confirmed the photo was taken in 1975 and concluded the men were, more than likely, the Anglins. Still, the photo's age and the sunglasses worn by both subjects prevented a definitive identification. Retired U.S. Marshal Art Roderick called Brizzy's photograph absolutely the best actionable lead we've had. In January 2020, facial recognition experts at the Irish agency IdentV confirmed that the men in the photo were indeed John and Clarence Anglin. Other evidence emerged over the years. On his deathbed in 2016, a man named John Leroy Kelly confessed to his nurse that he and an accomplice had assisted the escape. He claimed the two men waited in a white boat in the bay and picked up the escapees as they paddled toward shore, eventually traveling up the coast to Seattle. This account aligned with a report by off-duty San Francisco police officer Robert Chechi, who recalled seeing a white boat with its lights off in the marina on the night of the break. Initially appearing empty, the boat later shone a spotlight on the water before vanishing, a detail dismissed by the FBI at the time. In January 2018, a letter allegedly written by John Anglin surfaced. He revealed that he had cancer and that he was going to turn himself in if the authorities promised on TV that he would not spend over a year in prison and that he would get medical attention. The letter also revealed that Clarence died in 2008 and Morris in 2005. CBS San Francisco reported that it had obtained the letter from an anonymous source. In 2013, the FBI conducted fingerprint tests on the letter, but the results were inconclusive. On November 15, 2025, a YouTube collaboration brought new life to the infamous Alcatraz escape. Mark Rober, together with journalist Johnny Harris and video journalist Cleo Abram, meticulously recreated the breakout using the same plans and period materials as Morris, West, and the Anglin brothers. They studied original magazine articles, improvised tools, and handmade implements similar to those the prisoners were believed to have used. The team constructed a handmade raft, paddles, and life preservers, then set out on the tides from Alcatraz. Their journey carried them not to Angel Island, as often assumed, but to a point near the Golden Gate Bridge. The successful experiment, similar to the Mythbusters method, demonstrated that the escape, long considered legendary, was entirely plausible. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.